An American spacecraft carrying two astronauts will launch from US soil for the first time in nearly 9 years in about 12 hours' time. It will take the astronauts to the International Space Station, and it's a collaboration between NASA and Elon Musk's SpaceX. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Warwick Holmes, who's a space engineering consultant for the European Union. Warwick, good to talk to you.
Hello, Andrew.
So SpaceX is probably more well known for space tourism and cargo. So how large a step is this in launching two astronauts into space?
Well, Andrew, it's very significant because this is in fact the first time, as you said, in 9 years that the United States has had the capability to launch its own astronauts to the International Space Station. What is so significant in this particular launch is the fact that it's the first time that there's a private commercial company that's actually launching astronauts not only into orbit, but for the first time doing a direct rendezvous with the International Space Station.
Yeah, of course, because space travel of any form is hideously expensive. In fact, the way that Americans have been getting into space, certainly to the International Space Station to date, has been via the Soyuz, the Russian spacecraft. And I understand that costs up to $120 million per astronaut, whereas Elon Musk says that he can do it for around $30 million per astronaut.
Andrew, those figures are absolutely correct. In fact, there's a contract with Elon Musk with SpaceX to do 6 launches for a total cost of $2.6 billion. But so long as they get 7 astronauts on each launch, yes, that does turn out to be $30 million per astronaut per launch. Soyuz, as you said, is $120 million, so it's 4 times cheaper.
So is this the future of space travel?
Well, it is, because what it does now is it proves that the private sector can actually develop these very complex launch vehicles successfully to all the safety constraints which exist to successfully get astronauts into space. So it's very challenging also to Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos, because he too is in the race in the private commercial space sector. This is proof now that we're at a stage in history where private commercial companies are launching astronauts into space. It's a very, very significant step.
Warwick, we're just looking at some vision of the astronauts in the spacecraft. It looks really sleek, almost out of a Hollywood movie, which is not far removed from reality, because I understand those spacesuits were designed by a Hollywood costume designer.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I think his name was Fernandez was the man. Look, the space capsule is very advanced in the sense that the Space Shuttle, which was the last American launch vehicle that could take astronauts into space, was effectively launched, it was designed 39 years ago. So today, they've got what they call basically a glass cockpit, which means that there are no switches. The Space Shuttle had 2,000 switches, but the Dragon has only a pure glass cockpit, which is touch screens. They have racing car seats, and it's a very, very different technology. So the spacesuits are also very light, very, very sleek. They're not able to go outside, but they don't have to. They're only for transfer up to the ISS. So in terms of technology and innovation, this is a very, very modern spacecraft, 40 years better than the Space Shuttle.
Yes, so it really is fully automated then. So is there any necessity for pilots as such, given this is really just a true shuttle?
Well, look, this mission, yes, they could actually do the entire mission without touching the panels at all. There's an autopilot mode which gets you from launch to docking without having any human intervention at all. But of course, the reason there are pilots and astronauts on board is if something goes wrong, as is always the case in these very, very complex systems. So for this first launch, they will actually manually be taking control of the spacecraft. I mean, even though they don't have to, if the software works perfectly, they can do the whole thing without touching the screens. But they will be doing some manual overrides to prove that they can take control and that they have got the training to do it. But yes, the software now, the systems, the redundancy, the robustness of the engineering is so good. It's a much, much safer mission than in the early Apollo days.
And of course, the aim is to get back to the moon and eventually Mars. So what role will these private firms have in that goal, and how soon is that likely to eventuate, do you think?
Well, the private companies are massively reducing the cost of getting access to space. But I think that possibly one slight exaggeration we get from Elon sometimes is this discussion about going to Mars very soon. I personally think we're about 20 or 30 years away from actually getting to Mars. I'm sorry, I said moon. I meant to say Mars. We first have to go back to the moon and establish the systems and the sustainable habitation on the moon for about at least 10 or at least 20 years, to have the engineering and the systems to then go to Mars. So this is a fantastic precursor to getting to the moon, and that will be done far more cheaply than the government spending of NASA.
And how soon is that likely to be, sorry, Warwick, because they're already behind that projection. They had planned to be there by this year.
Look, that's true. They're talking about having astronauts walking on the moon in 2025. So the International Space Station is planned to go possibly to 2030. That's an extension of 5 years. And there'll be a bit of overlap there. But they're hoping to have humans walking on the moon by 2025.
Warwick Holmes, always great to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew.